Hello. I will show you today the new highlight from Oracle. It's called GraalVM, and it's used to run programs faster almost anywhere. So I'm Delic, I'm solution engineer, and I'm working for Oracle, and let's start. So I have 4 typical personas, friend personas in my life, and I bet that you can hear the same statements also that I'm going to show here. So the first persona type would ask you what to focus on. There are so many languages on the market. What's my best career path? How to choose it? And it's a really tough question because there is so much options and it's not easy to answer on it. The second type of a persona is kind of a CTO persona. It's your CTO friend, which will state that it's so hard to find the developers that are not struggling always with new platform, with new frameworks and typical stuff. Very reasonable, I can understand them. The third type of a persona would be people who are dealing with the business logic on a database level, something which we are familiar with the Oracle, right? Because there is some kind of a database business. But then again, if you take a look that it's a PLSQL here mentioned, it means that the ecosystem of the language is kind of limited, especially if you try to compare it with the modern approaches regarding the DevOps cycles and similar. The fourth type of persona is a very interesting one. I'm calling them troll friends, and they are always stating Java is slow and Java is legacy. So these are typical first world problems for developers. And if you want to create a new world, a better world, at least from the Java perspective, you need to include all those personas to think about it. So how do we resolve and solve these kind of problems? I would say with ultimate refactoring. And what is ultimate refactoring? To be able to do that, it's a hard process. We are dealing with this for years now. But to be able to do that, you need to be familiar with 3 pillars. And the first pillar is something very logical. You need to achieve great performance. You need to be at warp speed. So if you are building microservices, especially on the Java level, you need to be fast enough because the responsiveness is really important. But you also need to be inclusive, which means that all 4 types of persona needs to be somehow scoped into the new platform that we are building. Okay, so we resolved 1 pillar. The second pillar, there is an ecosystem and standardization. So if somebody is familiar with the JavaScript, it's not enough to include the JavaScript as a language that you can run anywhere, but you need to bring the ecosystem in. What does it mean? It means that you need to bring NPM package manager, for example, also to act natively on the new platform. You need to be standardized. If somebody is using debugger tools from the JavaScript environment, you need to bring those also on the platform. And the third pillar is the interesting one. It's called developer experience. And in my honest opinion, it's the most important one. Because why? We are developers, but we are still humans. I'm the human too. I want to have a nice experience when dealing with the frameworks, when dealing with the IDEs, when dealing with the Java itself. So developer experience, by the definition, could be this little image here. It's a smile on a face of a developer who is using and dealing with a technology that it's not frustrating, that it's open, inclusive, efficient, fast, or whatever. And by definition, I would say that developer experience is the equivalence to the user experience, just the user this time is the developer itself. It's something that you are used to do, right? You have the smile on the face when you are developing or not. I'm remembering also the hard days when I was developing constantly, and it wasn't always a very good experience. It wasn't always a pleasure. So what is GraalVM? This is our topic for today, and GraalVM is basically a highly performant polyglot machine that is able to speak the languages like the JavaScript, Python, Ruby, R, C, C++, you name it. Any language, anywhere, very fast. So we are dealing with interoperability in between languages. We are trying to include all those languages on the platform and to be efficient in the same time, very fast, preparing for the age of the very fast serverless computing. GraalVM can really achieve warp speeds with the nativeness, and I will explain it a little bit later. GraalVM is much more than that. GraalVM is 10 years of scientific research in the Oracle Labs, plus maybe even 60+ scientific articles written on the topics of the ahead-of-time compilation, polyglots, very efficient speeds, and similar stuff. So GraalVM is kind of a black box. You will see the technology details, but for now, it's maybe gray box here, which, as each black box is having, that's an input, which is basically a set of languages. You will see that there is Java, JavaScript, Ruby, R, Python, C, C++, and similar stuff. So if we stated that we need to be inclusive, you need to bring them all on the platform. And if this is an input, then there is a question, what's the output? And the output is very straightforward and easy. OpenJDK, you need to be able to deploy, to compile all those languages to the JDK platform, to the JVM itself. But you need to deploy it on the Node.js, even the Oracle database, or the last one is the standalone application. So you see, it's kind of a mix. And basically, what I'm telling you right now, it sounds like I'm promising that there is some kind of a magic. You are very, very familiar with this one, right? And we are trying to equip our best superheroes to use it. So this is kind of my promise, and let's see if this is even possible. So to be able to describe the architecture, it's not the easy one, but I will try to use a little story about it. So once upon a time, you know the story, there was a hotspot. So hotspot itself, it was a perfect tool designed for our superheroes, and it was forged in the heart of the sun. Sun was, of course, the name of the corporation. And it served perfectly. So it was the age of the SOA, service-oriented architecture, right? You're remembering that age. But then again, the Earth started to shake, and through the microfractures, new models were released. And one of the models was, of course, microservice models. So device makers knew that they need to create something else. They need to create something faster, better, more efficient, more performant. So they designed a very specific thing. They created, you see, in the red color, JVM compiler interface. So they extracted compiler interface from the hotspot itself, so that they are able to create external compiler, which is called Graal compiler. And Graal compiler was rewritten in Java completely. So we have Java compiler written in Java, of course. Why? For the same reason why you would choose Java instead of the C, right? For the manageability. So it gave us really advantage on the topic of performance and efficiency. But device makers knew that it's simply not enough. You are not able to equip your superheroes just with a pure compiler, right? So they decided to search for something which is very rare, rare as the white truffle itself. And they were able to find it, and they called it the truffle framework. And the truffle framework is responsible for the inclusiveness. So truffle framework is the enabler of a developer who is developing Java applications to include also components from, for example, from the JavaScript or the Python itself. But still, this was not a victory. It was just the beginning, because of the lot of friends of the makers were still imprisoned by the LLVM languages like the C, C++. They needed to do something else. So they created Solong, which is basically inclusive platform, which enabled all the languages LLVM compatible to be included in the platform. So now you have the inclusiveness. You have all the wide range of languages to be supported by the platform. And still, it wasn't enough to gain the victory in the age of microservices. So the last thing that they needed to equip our superheroes was the native image. So instead of the middleware like the hotspot, they created the native compilation of all those languages to be deployed almost natively upon the hardware, which gained very, very, very performance speeds. So basically, Substrate VM is the component that takes care of the memory management and secure execution, but it brings a superpower to the age of the microservices. So now that you are able to understand GraalVM architecture, let's try to explore a little bit what's the developer experience from the platform. GraalVM is a polyglot, and you will see a small snapshot of a code written in JavaScript for the Node.js, right? For the guys who are dealing with the Node.js, you will be very much familiar with the Express here. So it's the framework which can enable you to achieve very quick start for the serving of the HTTP applications. But the main message on this slide is hidden here. I'm using the big integer from the foreign language. In this case, foreign language is Java itself, and I'm using a big integer here, which is commonly used in almost everywhere. So I can use it natively, and I can respect even the immutability of the language. So take a look at this big integer, value of 2, power 200, give me a hexa. That's nice, and it executes in the environment of the JVM. Even further, I'm able to evaluate the expression from the R language. R is the statistical language commonly used with the data to express visualizations and to gather statistical data. So even this can be executed on the platform itself. GraalVM is a native, so you don't need to have a hotspot to run it. Of course, you can run it almost natively with the help of a substrate, as you've been able to see on the architectural slide. So this is a common way how to compile a Java application. So you are invoking Java-C hello world, okay, and then you're running with the Java hello world, prefixing it with a time to measure how much time do you spend on the execution. And now take a look at this, 0.07 seconds. Fast enough, it's using a hotspot underneath, but now let's see what happens if we are using a ahead-of-time compilation. So if you want to create a native image, you will do native image command, invoking hello world bytecode here, and then invoke it also by prefix of time. And now you see what's the performance boost, 0.005, almost larger than 10 times. It's very efficient, it's very fast. There are some side effects. So because the ahead-of-time compilation requires to gather all the data, all the dynamically loaded classes, in the time of compilation, you need to be aware that there is some time needed to include everything into the image. So maybe you will wear these t-shirts with fully write, and it takes some time. So there is always time-space trade-off in between ahead-of-time compilation and just-in-time compilation. GraalVM is embeddable, so we are trying to spread to the world of database developers, of guys who are dealing with PLSQL. So if you have tons of data which are written in the database and you need a quick access to that data, you don't need to extract the data from the database. You can import the GraalVM into the database, and you can do complex analysis. And there is an interesting package which is called Sentiment, which is basically the sentiment analyzer of human wording of the sentences. So I'm installing with the npm sentiment here, and then by a magic, I'm able to plug it into the database, and I'm able to select function analyze from the sentiment package with a sentence. I like it, works perfectly from Dual, which is a dummy database. The result is pretty much straightforward. Score 9, it's positive, it's very much positive result. So GraalVM can be embedded almost anywhere, and we are trying to include it everywhere to achieve inclusiveness. GraalVM is standardized. If you are a Node.js developer, and if you want to bring your Node.js code on the GraalVM itself, you are dealing also with for example, a Chrome debugger, and you are not forced to use, for example, Eclipse debuggers. So you can really achieve the rich ecosystem and all the things that your platform brings, grab it and take it with you. People are asking all the time, what's the language support? How good do you support different types of languages? So I have a statistical data here. So in comparison with the Node.js, we are covering the similar syntax. So I guess that you will not be disappointed with the power of the GraalVM itself. Even for the ECMAScript 6, there is like comparable comparable ratio, I think 97% for both for Node.js implementation, but also for the GraalVM implementation. So 97% of available syntax and grammar, of course. This is kind of on the right side. This is kind of speed up graph, which will explain to you how much speed up do you get when you are using a GraalVM instead of the native platform. And for the Ruby and R, you are able to see that it's almost 5 times, because these languages are interpreted languages, and it takes some time. And if you're dealing with a GraalVM, it will compile it for you, and it will enable the interoperability in between. So I guess there are some performance benefits. Still, depending on what benchmark you are using, we are still catching the best implementation from the JavaScript world, but in some benchmarks we are better, in some we are in behind. But I think that we will be very good in a year, or maybe even with the 2. This is Quarkus. It's a nice piece of I would say maybe microservice equipment. Maybe you did some development with it, and there is a nice showcase here spread across 2 different domains. So take a look on the first item here. If you're using just the REST from the Quarkus, the GraalVM itself will boot and give you first response in a warp speed in comparison with the REST approaches. So it's pretty much efficient and very fast. If you include REST plus JPA to include some database capabilities to enable some persistence into the database, you will find also very nice result here, 0.055 seconds to boot and to give you the first response. Less is, of course, better. Traditionally, if you are dealing with a heavyweight application servers, you will find some class loading in behind, and you will have some waiting time. So this is outstanding performance. References. So one of the best is this one. So Twitter is using GraalVM. So Twitter is having a bunch of microservices. And they're written in Scala mostly. And there is a speech also which you can follow by following this link here. So the Twitter explained how they boosted just using a Graal compiler. So they are not using a ahead of time compilation, but just the Graal compiler, which was rewritten in the Java itself. And they gained so much performance boost that they are pretty much happy from it. And I have also one similar reference, but it's totally different, Goldman. Take a look at this. So they have Slang language. So they created in 1992. It's the old languages, it's interpreted. And it means that it's kind of a slow, like it's really legacy and obsolete technology. And because the GraalVM itself, it's very much inclusive, you are able to port it easily because we have a framework to do so. And when they did that, they were kind of also on the warp speed, because the GraalVM gave them the perfect execution platform. So it's a really nice experience for a team at Goldman Sachs. GraalVM itself is a production ready. So basically, there are 2 flavors. One flavor is a community edition, and there is enterprise edition, which is officially supported from Oracle, of course. And the whole story is the open source on the GitHub. I will share the links, and you will be able to explore a little bit. Let's try to figure out why to use GraalVM itself. GraalVM is really highly performant. I mentioned that there is a compiler rewritten in Java, which provided so much optimization that it's really outstanding. And there is a ahead-of-time compilation, which is basically very, very important thing here to mention. So you're able to use native images, and now imagine in combination with the Docker, in combination with the Kubernetes, in combination with the serverless. It's really performance boost, and it's really interesting technology for the future for our superheroes. It's polyglot. Nobody is excluded. All 4 types of persona are invited to come on the platform. The thing is native, which gives the performance, and through which you are able to go closer to the database and go closer to the standalone applications, to go closer to the cloud, wherever you want. It's pretty much native, and with the ahead-of-time compilation, you are getting a really nice boost. It's completely open source, so find it on the GitHub. And if you combine all of these, you will get a perfect equipment for our superheroes. Thank you very much. These are the links.